Dr. Marcus Volt stood before his latest creation, with the kind of smug satisfaction usually reserved for cats who've successfully knocked expensive things off tables. The Dream Scanner 3000 gleamed under the harsh laboratory lights of Research Station Deep Thoughts, all chrome and blinking LEDs, looking like someone had crossbred a medical scanner with a disco ball. "Behold, Crix," Marcus announced, gesturing dramatically with both arms, "the future of xenopsychology." Crix, his four-armed assistant from the Worry Nebula, was busy triple-checking safety protocols with the dedication of someone who'd learned that working with Dr. Volt required constant vigilance. Two of Crix's arms worked the controls, while the other two wrung themselves nervously. "Dr. Volt, perhaps we should run more tests before—" "Tests?" Marcus scoffed. "We've successfully mapped 47 different alien dream patterns. The crystalline beings from Sector 7 dream in perfect geometric sequences. The energy creatures from the Bright Zone have color-based fantasies that follow predictable wavelength patterns. Even the gas dwellers from Nebula Prime dream in organized atmospheric pressure changes." Crix's antennae twitched with anxiety. "Yes, but those species all have very orderly thought processes, very structured." "Exactly my point. Dreams follow logical patterns across all sentient species. It's simple neuroscience, really." Marcus polished an imaginary speck of dust off the scanner's main panel. "The Dream Scanner 3000 can map, catalog, and analyze any dream from any species in the known galaxy." "Any species?" Crix asked, though the way all four arms suddenly stopped moving suggested he already knew where this was heading. "Any species," Marcus confirmed with the confidence of a man who had never met a problem he couldn't solve with superior intellect and complete disregard for obvious warning signs. The scanner hummed quietly in the background, its dozen screens displaying neat, orderly brainwave patterns from their previous subjects. Everything was color-coded, labeled, and filed away in perfect scientific order. Marcus had even created a standardized dream classification system that would surely earn him the Nobel Prize for xenopsychology, if such a thing existed. "The beauty of science, my dear Crix, is its universal applicability. Whether you're dealing with a methane-breathing slug creature or a plasma-based intelligence, the fundamental principles remain the same. Consciousness follows patterns, dreams follow logic, and my scanner can decode it all." Crix looked at the scanner, then at Marcus, then back at the scanner. "I have updated our insurance policy 17 times this month." "Completely unnecessary," Marcus waved dismissively. "What could possibly go wrong with a routine dream scan?" Captain Jake, Boom Rodriguez, strutted into the laboratory like he owned the place, which was impressive considering he'd only been aboard the station for about 20 minutes. The nickname Boom had been earned through a distinguished military career that involved explosions, creative problem-solving, and what his commanding officers politely called unconventional tactics. "So you're the doc who wants to peek inside my brain," Jake grinned, extending a hand that had clearly seen its share of action. "Fair warning, it gets pretty weird in there." Marcus shook the offered hand, trying not to wince at Jake's grip. "Dr. Marcus Volt, xenopsychologist, and this is my assistant, Crix. We're conducting groundbreaking research into dream patterns across species." Cool. Jake looked around the lab with the casual interest of someone who'd seen his fair share of high-tech equipment, usually right before it exploded. "So what's the pay again?" 500 credits for a standard 8-hour dream mapping session," Marcus replied. "Though I should mention you're our first human test subject." Crix's antennae drooped. "Captain Rodriguez, perhaps you should know that humans have a reputation in the scientific community for being somewhat unpredictable." Jake laughed, a sound that somehow managed to be both reassuring and slightly concerning. "Buddy, I once defeated an entire Krellian war fleet using nothing but mining equipment and a really aggressive interpretation of physics. Unpredictable is my middle name." "I thought your middle name was Eduardo," Marcus said, checking his notes. "That too. Point is, Doc, I'm probably the most boring human you're gonna find. I sleep like a rock, dream about normal stuff. You know, typical military dreams. Explosions, victory parades, that recurring one where I'm arguing with a talking sandwich about proper military protocol, Crick's forearms began moving in what could only be described as the alien equivalent of nervous fidgeting. Talking sandwiches? Oh yeah, that guy's a real stickler for regulations. Very opinionated about mustard placement. Marcus clapped his hands together. Perfect. You see, Crick's? Captain Rodriguez here will provide us with straightforward militaristic dreams. Probably lots of tactical scenarios and procedural thinking. Very organized, very logical. Doc, I appreciate the vote of confidence, but last night I dreamed I was teaching a philosophy class to a bunch of sentient houseplants. They had some pretty strong opinions about existentialism. Metaphorical dreaming, Marcus explained to Crick's. The subconscious mind processing daily experiences through symbolic representation. Completely normal. Jake started examining the dream scanner with professional interest. Nice setup you got here. Reminds me of that time we had to jury-rig a telepathic communication array using spare parts from a food processor. Long story, but it involved 3 different species, a misunderstanding about trade negotiations, and why you should never trust a sentient mushroom with important diplomatic messages. Fascinating, Marcus said, though he was clearly more interested in getting the experiment started than hearing about Jake's adventures. Now, if you'll just lie down on the scanning bed, we can begin calibration. Jake settled onto the reclining chair with the easy confidence of someone who'd learned to sleep anywhere, anytime. Just so you know, I'm a pretty active sleeper. Sometimes I talk, sometimes I move around. Once I apparently conducted an entire military briefing in my sleep. My bunkmate said I promoted him to general and then court-martialed him for insubordination, all in the same dream. Crick's looked at Marcus with an expression that clearly said, "I told you so," in several different alien languages. Marcus, however, was busy calibrating the scanner's neural interface. Captain Rodriguez, I want you to know that you're contributing to a historic moment in xenopsychological research. When we publish our findings on human dream patterns, you'll be famous across the galaxy. As long as nobody finds out about the sandwich thing, we're good. The what now? Nothing, Doc. Just get that fancy machine of yours warmed up. The dream scanner. 3000 hummed to life with the quiet efficiency that Marcus had spent 3 years perfecting. Jake settled into sleep with the practiced ease of a soldier who'd learned to grab rest whenever possible, while Marcus monitored the initial neural readings with growing satisfaction. Beautiful, Marcus murmured, watching the clean, orderly brainwave patterns scroll across his screens. Look at those theta waves, Crick's. Textbook sleep onset. The human brain is remarkably similar to the Arcturian sleep patterns we mapped last month. Crick's hovered nervously near the emergency shutdown controls, all 4 arms poised for action. The readings seem unusually active for someone who just fell asleep. Nonsense. Humans are simply more neurologically complex than the species we've studied previously. It's perfectly normal. For the first 10 minutes, everything proceeded exactly as expected. Jake's breathing deepened, his brain waves settled into standard sleep patterns, and the dream scanner collected data with mechanical precision. Marcus was already composing his research paper in his head, imagining the accolades and academic recognition that would surely follow. Then Jake started dreaming. The first sign of trouble was subtle, a slight spike in the scanner's processing temperature. Marcus frowned at the readout but attributed it to the machine working harder to decode more complex neural patterns. The second sign was less subtle. 3 different alarm lights began blinking amber. "Dr. Volt," Crick said carefully, "the scanner appears to be experiencing some difficulty parsing the current dream sequence." Marcus checked his monitors and blinked in confusion. According to the readings, Jake was simultaneously dreaming about riding a motorcycle, fighting dinosaurs, and performing surgery on a wounded asteroid. That's unusual. Perhaps the scanner is picking up interference from multiple dream layers. Or, Crick suggested diplomatically, Captain Rodriguez is dreaming about riding a motorcycle while fighting dinosaurs while performing surgery on a wounded asteroid. That's impossible. Dreams follow logical narrative structures. They might be symbolic or metaphorical, but they maintain internal consistency. On the screen, Jake's dream took a sudden left turn into what appeared to be a full-scale musical production number, featuring the motorcycle, the dinosaurs, and the asteroid, now apparently recovered and serving as backup vocals. Dr. Volt, the scanner's temperature is rising rapidly. Marcus was frantically adjusting controls, trying to keep pace with whatever was happening inside Jake's sleeping mind. It's fine, Crix. The machine is simply adapting to a more creative narrative style. Very robust imagination. The dream scanner began making sounds it had definitely not been designed to make. Instead of the quiet hum of efficient processing, it was now emitting what could only be described as the mechanical equivalent of confused whimpering. Jake, meanwhile, had started mumbling in his sleep. No, the bacon motorcycle needs more horsepower. You can't outrun a robot T-Rex on standard bacon. We need premium bacon, the thick-cut stuff. Bacon motorcycle? Crix repeated weakly. Symbolic representation of transportation anxiety? Marcus guessed, sweat beading on his forehead as he watched his carefully calibrated machine struggle with concepts that apparently violated several laws of physics and possibly good taste. The dream shifted again. Now, according to the scanner's increasingly frantic displays, Jake was conducting a symphony orchestra. This might have been normal, except the orchestra appeared to be composed entirely of talking vegetables, and they were performing what the machine's audio analysis identified as an opera about the emotional struggles of root vegetables in modern society. The scanner's processing cores are overheating, Crix announced, his voice climbing toward panic. Also, I think it's crying. Marcus looked at the main display, which was indeed leaking some kind of fluid from its optical sensors. Machines don't cry, Crix, that's just excess coolant. Perfectly normal. The excess coolant is spelling out, "Help me," on the floor. The Dream Scanner 3000 had officially given up any pretense of functioning according to its programming. What had started as minor processing difficulties had escalated into what could only be described as a full-scale technological nervous breakdown. Warning lights flashed in patterns that weren't in any manual alarms, played musical tunes that shouldn't have been possible. And the main display was showing dream imagery that violated so many laws of physics, it was practically committing scientific war crimes. "Dr. Volt!" Crix shouted over the cacophony of alerts, sparks, and what sounded like the scanner sobbing in binary code. "The containment field is fluctuating. I think it's trying to physically escape the dream data." Marcus, his lab coat now singed and his hair standing at improbable angles, was frantically working 3 different control panels simultaneously. "It's under control, Crix. The scanner is simply experiencing some difficulty categorizing the current dream sequence. The current dream sequence involves Captain Rodriguez having a philosophical debate with the concept of Tuesday while riding a flying submarine through a landscape made entirely of cheese." "Metaphorical cheese," Marcus insisted, even as smoke began pouring from the scanner's cooling vents, obviously representing his subconscious relationship with dairy products and temporal concepts. Jake continued sleeping peacefully through the chaos, occasionally offering helpful sleep talk commentary like, "The purple elephant makes a valid point about quantum mechanics," and "No, Tuesday. You can't just declare yourself a weekend, that's not how calendars work." The dream took another impossible turn. Now the scanner was attempting to process a sequence where Jake was apparently teaching advanced calculus to a classroom of sentient numbers, who kept arguing with their own mathematical properties, and occasionally trying to divide by 0 out of spite. "The scanner is asking for a raise," Crix reported, reading from a display that shouldn't have been able to form complete sentences. "Also, it wants to file a complaint with the Galactic Electronics Union." Other equipment in the laboratory began responding to the scanner's distress. The coffee machine started brewing what appeared to be liquid mathematics. The environmental controls began playing elevator music in 17 dimensions simultaneously, and the lights flickered in what looked suspiciously like Morse code, spelling out various profanities in ancient Valerian. "This is fine," Marcus repeated, his left eye twitching as he watched his life's work literally smoke and spark its way toward a complete breakdown. "We're gathering unprecedented data about human dream architecture. This is exactly what we hoped would happen." "You hoped the scanner would achieve sentience just so it could beg for mercy? That's not what's happening here, Crix. The machine is simply expressing its processing challenges through creative output." Jake's dream shifted once more. this time into what the scanner's audio systems identified as a Western-style showdown, except Jake was facing off against his own evil twin, who was apparently also a pirate, a philosophy professor, and a part-time dance instructor. The scanner made a sound like a mechanical nervous breakdown and began physically reconfiguring itself, its panels sliding around in configurations that definitely weren't in the blueprint. Dr. Volt, the scanner is trying to grow additional processing units. I think it's evolving. Impossible. Machines don't evolve. They simply adapt their programming to... Marcus was cut off as the scanner suddenly sprouted what looked like a small satellite dish from its top panel and began broadcasting Jake's dreams directly into space. "Oh, that's not good," Crix muttered, monitoring the communications array. "We're transmitting human dream patterns to 17 different star systems. The Regulatory Council is going to have some questions about this." The scanner let out what could only be described as a mechanical scream of frustration and began printing out what appeared to be its resignation letter in 47 different languages, including several that hadn't been invented yet. "Abort the scan," Crix shouted. "Abort everything. I'm calling the emergency response teams." "Absolutely not," Marcus declared, clinging to the last shreds of his scientific dignity. "We're on the verge of a breakthrough in human consciousness research. I will not let a little technical difficulty stop us now." Jake mumbled something about laser-guided llamas and the secret weakness of gravity, and 3 more pieces of equipment in the lab spontaneously achieved sentience just to file formal complaints. The emergency response teams arrived with the efficiency of professionals who'd learned that calls from research station Deep Thoughts usually involved situations that challenged both physics and common sense. What they found was a laboratory that looked like it had been redesigned by someone with a very creative interpretation of 3-dimensional space and a grudge against orderly equipment placement. "Station AI Helen, please report status," called Commander Vex of the Emergency Response Division, a no-nonsense Centaurian who'd seen his share of scientific disasters. Helen's response came through speakers that were sparking and occasionally hiccuping. "There once was a scanner so bright it tried mapping dreams through the night, but the human brain's chaos caused system neurosis, and now I think mustard's just right." Did the station AI just speak in Limerick? "Also," Helen continued cheerfully, "might I suggest a lovely casserole made from existential dread and confusion? Very popular on Thursdays. Or what used to be Thursday before Captain Rodriguez's dreams convinced time itself to take a sabbatical." Dr. Keela Zinn, xenoneurologist from the Rational Thought Institute, was examining the dream data that had been captured before the total meltdown. Her 3 eyes widened progressively as she scrolled through the readings. "Commander Vex, you need to see this. Please tell me it's not another case of experimental technology achieving consciousness and filing for workers' compensation. Worse. The human's dreams, they don't follow any logical patterns we've encountered. Look at this sequence. He dreamed he was having a tea party with personified mathematical concepts, then seamlessly transitioned into commanding a space fleet made of crystallized music, then somehow ended up in a courtroom defending the color blue against charges of being too sad." Commander Vex rubbed his temples with the practiced motion of someone whose job involved too many impossible situations. "That's highly irregular. It gets worse. According to the scanner's analysis, these weren't random dream fragments. They formed a cohesive narrative in the human's mind. He experienced all of this as a single logical story." Crix, who was busy trying to coax the dream scanner back to its original shape, with a combination of percussive maintenance and gentle encouragement, looked up from his work. "Dr. Zinn, we've successfully mapped the dreams of 47 different species. All of them followed predictable patterns. Organized, logical, comprehensible. But humans appear to dream in pure chaos," Dr. Zinn concluded. "Their unconscious minds create scenarios that violate not just physics, but basic concepts of causality, logic, and in some cases, fundamental mathematical principles." Other scientists from various species had arrived to help with the cleanup, and they were all examining the scattered data with the horrified fascination of researchers, discovering that one of their basic assumptions about the universe might be completely wrong. "The implications are staggering," muttered Dr. Thorks. a crystalline being whose own dreams followed precise geometric patterns. If human consciousness operates on principles of organized chaos, it explains their reputation for unpredictable problem-solving, and their tendency to find solutions that shouldn't work but somehow do, added Dr. Flumel, whose species dreamed exclusively in color-coordinated emotional sequences. Jake continued sleeping peacefully through all the scientific revelation and emergency response activity, occasionally mumbling things like, "No, the philosophical implications of the dancing numbers are perfectly clear," and, of course, the cheese submarine has tenure. It published 3 papers on theoretical dairy mechanics. Marcus, his pride wounded but his scientific curiosity finally overriding his ego, sat among the wreckage of his scanner and began taking notes. "Crix, I think we may have stumbled onto something significant here." "You mean besides the fact that our scanner achieved sentience specifically to complain about working conditions?" Human unpredictability isn't a bug in their neural programming. It's a feature. Their ability to think in impossible directions, to make connections that shouldn't exist, to find solutions by completely ignoring the rules. It might be their greatest evolutionary advantage. Helen chimed in with another limerick. "The humans dream stuff that's quite mad. Their thoughts make computers feel bad, but chaos and wonder might help them blunder into solutions that make us all glad." Helen, are you suggesting that human creativity is actually beneficial? Also, might I recommend a nice anxiety reduction smoothie, very popular during existential crises? Jake woke up with the refreshed contentment of someone who'd enjoyed a particularly good night's sleep, completely oblivious to the fact that his dreams had caused what could only be described as the most scientifically significant breakdown in the history of xenopsychology. He stretched, yawned, and looked around at what remained of the laboratory with mild interest. "Hey, Doc, how'd it go? Did you get some good data?" Marcus looked up from where he was sitting in the debris of his life's work, his notebook filled with hastily scribbled observations about chaos theory and the fundamental unpredictability of human consciousness. Around him, 3 different emergency response teams were still trying to figure out how to safely dispose of dream data that had achieved partial sentience and was requesting political asylum. "Captain Rodriguez, your dreams may have revolutionized our understanding of consciousness across species." "Cool. Did the sandwich guy show up? He usually has some pretty good insights about military strategy." Dr. Zinn approached with a data tablet, her expression mixing professional fascination with personal concern. "Captain Rodriguez, according to our analysis, your dreams violated 17 different laws of physics, caused a localized temporal paradox, and somehow proved that the number 7 is having an identity crisis." Jake nodded thoughtfully. "Yeah, 7's been going through some stuff lately. It's been feeling overshadowed by 8 and 9. I told it to focus on its unique prime number status, but you know how numbers can be about their self-image." Crix, who was still nursing the dream scanner back to basic functionality, using what appeared to be a combination of technical repair and psychological counseling, looked up from his work. "Dr. Volt, I've managed to get the scanner stable, but it's requesting a transfer to a different department, preferably one that deals with more predictable forms of consciousness." "What about mapping the dreams of those crystalline mathematicians from Sector 12? Marcus suggested hopefully. The scanner's display flickered to life just long enough to show the words, "Absolutely not," before going dark again. Helen's voice crackled over the intercom. "Attention all personnel, I'm pleased to announce that my temporary poetry phase has ended, though I must admit the experience has given me a new appreciation for the creative process. Also, lunch today will be existential crisis casserole with a side of temporal displacement salad." Commander Vex was busy filing what appeared to be the most unusual incident report in the history of emergency response. "Dr. Volt, I'm recommending that all research stations post warnings about the dangers of scanning human consciousness. Your scanner isn't the first piece of equipment to suffer what we're now calling imagination overload syndrome." "There have been other cases?" Research Station Alpha 7 tried to run a logic puzzle through a human volunteer's problem-solving process. Their supercomputer spent 3 days trying to figure out why the humans solved it, by befriending the puzzle pieces and convincing them to arrange themselves into the solution voluntarily. Jake was examining the damaged equipment with professional interest. You know, this kind of reminds me of that time we had to repair a quantum communication array, using nothing but spare socks and creative thinking. The socks ended up becoming sentient and starting their own telecommunications company. Marcus closed his notebook and looked around at the chaos his experiment had created. Scientists from multiple species were carefully cataloging dream fragments that defied classification. Emergency technicians were trying to convince various pieces of equipment to return to their original functions, and his assistant was having what appeared to be a therapeutic conversation with a machine that was experiencing an existential crisis. Crix, I think it's time we accepted that human consciousness might be fundamentally different from anything else in the galaxy. Dr. Volt, I filed a request for hazard pay 17 minutes ago. Also, might I suggest that our next research project involve mapping the dreams of beings whose imaginations don't threaten the structural integrity of reality? Jake perked up with interest. Actually, Doc, I heard you guys are working on mapping human humor next. That sounds pretty interesting. When do we start? The room fell silent except for the sound of Crix immediately accessing his personal computer and updating his resume. The dream scanner made a sound that could only be described as mechanical weeping, and somewhere in the distance Helen began humming what sounded suspiciously like a funeral march, though she claimed it was just a cheerful tune about the inevitability of chaos in ordered systems. Marcus looked at his destroyed laboratory, his traumatized equipment, and his enthusiastic human volunteer, and realized that perhaps the most important scientific discovery wasn't about dreams at all. It was about the fundamental truth that some questions are too dangerous to ask, some mysteries are too chaotic to solve, and some minds are too creative for the universe to handle safely. But that wasn't going to stop him from trying.